Welcome to Identifying as Asian While Being an Actor Regional Theater Edition podcast. Talking shop with actors in the biz with your host, Ben Gonio.
Hi, everyone. It's Ben Gonio, and welcome to this first inaugural episode of this podcast entitled Identifying as Asian While Being an Actor. Our first guest is a very talented woman, and a little bit about her. She is a Seattle based performing artist and musician. And after years of performing and teaching hip hop, she pursued theater and has performed on many Seattle stages, including the Fifth Avenue Theater, the Village Theater, Act Theater, Book It Rep, and McCall Hall. Some of her stage favorites include Miss Saigon at the Fifth Avenue, The King and I at the Village Theater, Beauty and the Beast at the Village Theater, and What, a wonderful new musical from the writers of The Daily Show. And that was also done at the Village Theater, as well as Bad Apples at A Contemporary Theater. So, after touring Europe in 2008 as a principal singer on celebrity cruises, Heather decided to start her family back in Seattle. And she balances currently her work, family, and art. She's a proud member of Actors Equity and SAG-AFTRA, and one of her quotables here is, quote, as an Asian American, I have been through the common challenges many of my peers have also faced while breaking into the art and theater scene. I believe you can do anything unless you simply decide not to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Heather Gonio. Hi, Heather. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thanks for
Oh,
having me.
great. Hey, thanks for being on board with this. I thought I'd use you, have you on as our first guest because I found your journey as an artist very interesting. And you have an engineering degree, in fact. And so the title of this episode is uh, How to Do Theater with an Engineering Degree. So share with us right off the get go what got you started, and we'll ask some additional questions around how you feel your engineering degree has helped you as an artist and anything else you want to share with us.
Um, how I got started, do we start like from the very, very beginning? So I think it all started for me when I was six. Um, I come from Filipino immigrant parents. They came here in 1972. I was born in 79. Um, and they were always very, you know, obviously encouraging of doing, the practical thing. But from the time I could remember being alive, like I was always just a very creative person. And music was a huge thing for me. So when I was six, uh, I was taking a nap at home, and I woke up. It was like in the afternoon. I woke up to the sound of a piano being played, and I wasn't sure if it was a piano, um, or whatever. And so I got up and I walked down the hallway, and my dad is sitting there watching a movie, and on television there was this little boy, and he was wearing a wig, and he was playing the piano, and I was just like fixated on the screen, and I was like, what is this? And my dad was like, this is Amadeus. It's a movie I rented about Mozart. And I was like, who's Mozart? And so he told me who Mozart was. And I was just like, I am going to do that one day. I just like
Hmm.
claimed it to my dad. And so music was really the big thing for me that started it all.
Mhm.
I have just always been so passionate about music, and my parents eventually, got me into piano lessons, um, and so I was like classically trained on the piano for 8 years, um, and never had to be told to practice. I had to be told to stop practicing and get off the piano, because I was just so passionate about it. And um, so yeah, I started to sing in my high school choir, and started to accompany my choir on the piano as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of my interest in music and the arts and performing arts started when I was really little like that. And then my grandma, in the way my dad introduced me to that movie, she would play The Sound of Music like over and over again at home. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just became also just like infatuated with like this, the musicals and singing. And she would watch Grease and Annie, and I would just like copy all the songs and sing along and do all the choreography to the movies. We'd watch them like every day. We'd like alternate the movies every other day.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I just got into the arts that way.
So it's safe to say that music definitely was the catalyst, and then some exposure to the American musical theater scene um, through your grandmother, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what did you do after that? What as so we're tracing you now from age 6, and then you start in your elementary school years. What happens after elementary school? You head into high school, and what did you do?
Well, so like I said, I was very involved with the piano and choir, in high school. But things I feel like kind of took a turn a little bit uh in terms of just like my trajectory when I was 12.
Hmm.
My cousin, she knew that I was into music. She knew I was, into singing, and so she introduced me one day to she played this she gave me this cassette. I think it was a cassette tape probably at that time.
Hmm.
But she introduced me to this musical. She said, have you ever heard of this musical called Miss Saigon? It reminds me of you. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know why she said that, because I was pretty young, but I think maybe because I like to sing. I was like, no. So she played it for me, and I didn't have any context behind the musical. I just like was just hearing these songs.
Hmm.
But I found out, in general what it was about, and then found out, that the lead singer in this was Filipino. And
Hmm.
so I just became, again, like just infatuated by this woman, Leia Salonga, and her
What was
singing
it? What was
style.
it about Leia that fascinated you?
Well, just, I mean, well, just her voice,
Hmm.
and how crystal clear it was, and just, that Disney princess sound, like,
Right.
you know, but to just know that she was Filipino and she was in this like big, like sort of Broadway show. And then like about a year later, or maybe the same year, Aladdin came out. And then
What
it
year
took
was
me,
what year was this?
I think it was 2012 is when
Okay.
I got introduced to Miss Saigon. Then Aladdin came out,
Hmm.
and it took like a year for me to realize that they were the same person. So I was just like, this woman is Filipino. She is a major lead player in this Disney movie, and then she's a lead in this musical. And like, I'm like, she's Asian, and like, wow,
Hmm.
like I could actually do this, like just seeing her. And I think, she was like an inspiration to like a lot of, Asian female singers, Filipino singers. And
Sure.
so that kind of started my interest in musicals and theater. And it's funny because I didn't even really get into theater until like 12 years later. But it definitely, it created my interest for it. And
I think it sounds like it actually accelerated your interest in it by seeing Leia, because
yes,
you saw yourself,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But
There's a
at the
Phil.
time, right, yeah, and at the time though, I was just like, I thought, okay, well, that was still at that time where like you didn't think you could do any theater unless it was like an Asian show. So I started to like
Hmm.
try to learn about what other shows there were that I could possibly be in. At that time, you just wouldn't think that you could be in anything else besides like Miss Saigon, The King and I, Flower Drum Song, like but in
Did it
any
give you
case, I mean,
confidence to see her and see what she was doing? Did it give you confidence at all to feel like, oh, I can do this?
yeah, yeah, totally. And actually, my cousin gave me a copy of that soundtrack, and I started to play it like every day, and I would just sing along to it every day until I could, I like to say, like, somewhat sound like her. Like, I just wanted to emulate her sound. And so that 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 was like my voice lessons for, like, for a few years, was just singing along until I could figure out like what to do with my body and the mix of my voice to sound, like that. And I just started singing, and then, and so that gave me more confidence to take on solos in my choir in high school. And then, you know um we'll get into this in a bit, but like, I throughout college, I was going through engineering school, and just trying to be in as many sort of performing arts shows that I could get into in the college scene, because I had started to do the hip hop thing at that time. And so I would just like, I would just I would sing, solos and like talent shows and things like that in college. And so that's kind of what got me into singing. Yeah, was listening to Leia, knowing that she was doing it. This other Filipino actress,
How was that
was doing it.
experience for you going to college, pursuing engineering? Uh, what did you do to continue your interests, your newfound interests in music and the American musical theater scene? And
Well, yeah, I mean, going back to the engineering thing, as one could probably guess, watching this, my parents really encouraged me, enforced, maybe, I don't know, but they were very adamant about me doing something very practical, not necessarily like prestigious, but like, they wanted, my dad was an engineer, and I really looked up to him. And so I just figured, like, okay, I need to go to school and study this thing, because I'm really good at math and I should do that, and so, but I wasn't really passionate about it. And it took me a while to kind of realize that, I wasn't really so passionate about it, and halfway through school, I had approached my parents about like switching majors and stuff, and they were really surprised by it and stuff. But so what, eventually I just made the decision to finish it out, commit to it. But to answer your question, I just did not let that passion inside me for, performing and music and dance, like, die. I just,
so
while I was going to
were
school.
you doing, what were you doing and while you were in college? What performing did you do at all?
Yeah, well, so, and this is a whole other story, but I got into the hip hop scene kind of by accident. It was through an old friend. I found out about this dance studio in Seattle, called Westlake Dance Center, and they're very well known for their hip hop, especially. And a couple of really well known hip hop dance companies come out of Westlake. And so I started, going there, and I was just hustling, going to engineering school, then busing it to downtown Seattle to take hip hop classes, just to be as creative as I could while in school. And so I started to, get into the hip hop scene. I got into In Effect, which is like a, pretty well known, they're not around anymore, but a really well known hip hop company here in Seattle at the time, the late 90s, early 2000s. And so I was doing that. And I was also in another smaller group that came out of my college. So just doing that and gigging and doing like weekend, evening, hip hop shows while in engineering school. And a lot of times these shows were calling for like singers, or they knew I could sing. So they'd ask me, oh, could you come out and also do like a singing number? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. And so I was just doing that as often as I could. And I remember my mom, like, being really concerned every time I went out to a practice. She'd be like, "Why are you doing that? You're not even getting paid. Like, you need to, concentrate on school." But those things actually helped me get through school, because I don't think I probably want to blow my brains out if that's like all I was doing was in doing engineering classes. But it kept me sane. It kept me balanced and creative, and I infused a lot of creativity into even some of my engineering class projects and stuff. Um, and so
Would you do anything differently if you had to go back to that time?
Um, well, I mean, sure, I could, what, I mean, yeah, there, I guess there's a world where I could be like, yeah, I would have just completely quit school and I would have, studied music or gone to like Berkeley College of Music. I was looking into that school and just totally changed. But I mean, of course, yeah. But I think I, perhaps if I did that, I wouldn't have like the balance that I have now, I think. You know, um,
Mm.
when I finished, when I graduated from the UW, from engineering school, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, okay, that's done. You know, I got the piece of paper for you guys, and now I want to pursue what I really want to do. And I actually never got an engineering job, but I definitely utilized a lot of the skills that I, got out of that school to do other things. Like I'm a project manager now at Microsoft,
Mhm.
and so I'm still in tech, like the IT sort of space, um, and doing that actually gave me a lot of flexibility, because I'm a project manager at Microsoft, as a consultant, and so when you're in that capacity, you just have more flexibility, and so I it gave me the ability to to do shows, to do theater, um, and so yeah, I mean,
What advice would you give to uh individuals who are considering, like, say, maybe they have certain expectations of them to go a certain direction, and they're thinking of pivoting, or maybe just their hearts are really not into it, but you know they're quite maybe not sure, insecure about pursuing performing arts, and they don't know much about it. What, based on your experience, what would you say to folks just starting out and wanting to consider a path in the performing arts?
well, I would just say, you know, just not to give up. I mean, listen to your heart, listen to, you know, just don't ignore it. Don't ignore the desire that you might have, to be creative, to do things you love. I mean, I'm not saying what I did is I wouldn't recommend it, trying to force yourself to go through school doing something you don't really absolutely love, but I think it's really important you know, to try, even at whatever level you can do it, to do the things that are more authentic to you. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, um, you
Yeah.
know, the way that I got into like certain things is not really conventional, uh the thing with Miss Saigon, the way that happened, like I had always had it in my mind that I would be in Miss Saigon one day. I had no idea how that was going to happen. I just kept, I would just listen to this album from the time I was 12 until I was like 25. That's 13 years of listening to this album, going, one day I'm going to do it. I have no idea how, but I'm going to do it. Like, I didn't necessarily try to pursue anything in those 13 years, but I never forgot. Like, I never pushed that thought down going, oh, I don't know how that's going to happen. I was just like, I don't know, but one day I'm going to do it. It's just because it just has to happen, and
Mm-hmm.
so if whether you are really going to try to totally pursue it or you're like trying to do something different, but your heart is really want to do something else, just don't ignore that. At the very least, acknowledge it. And even if you don't do anything with it, acknowledging it will manifest itself into it one day. I mean, I'll tell you a story of how that happened, as an example with me. I had been doing hip hop for like 6 years intensely, dancing 30 to 40 hours a week. Again, just kind of going with the flow. I was like, okay, it's not really what I want to do, but I enjoy it. And at least it's better than, like just doing engineering classes or doing my job, and like not being creative. And one day, a very good friend who I did a lot of hip hop with in the past, Mark De La Cruz, who I like thank till this day, like he called me and he had started to do a little bit of theater. at that time. And he called me one day. I was 25. I was like kind of getting burnt out of the hip hop scene, still had this passion, this desire in my heart to like want to sing on stage and do more than just like singing in a talent show, right? And he calls me and he's like, the Fifth Ave is doing Miss Saigon. And I'm like, okay. I was very excited, but I was like, and he's like, you need to audition for it. And I'm like, dude, how am I going to do that? Like, I have no theater degree. I've never been in a school play even. And he's like, you look the way you do, you sing and you can dance and you can shake your booty. Like, you, you can do this show. Just try at least. And I picked a couple songs. I didn't know how to even audition. I didn't know the etiquette to audition for a theater. And I looked it up. Like, what do you do when you go in to audition for a show? And I go in and I belted my face off. I was just like, this is my one chance. I'm just gonna try. And I got into the show, and I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my god, like I don't know how I just did that. And it was the first show I had ever been cast in, like a theater show. I had never even done a high school play. I got cast in it. Um, and I went, I just got into Miss Saigon, and like it's something that I had dreamed about doing, but I think because I never told myself that's not going to happen, that's not going to happen. I just
Mm-hmm.
kept telling myself, I love it. I'm just going to keep singing it, and one day, who knows, maybe I'll be in. I don't know how, but I'll just, and so and that's actually what got me into the theater scene. It was the first show I'd ever been cast in, and here
Mm-hmm.
I was doing it with like Kingsley Legs and people who had been in like Broadway, and and that's just what opened the door for me. So
Sure.
so going back to your question, I think um I I don't think I necessarily got into theater with an engineering degree, but it's like I I was able to manifest doing something that would otherwise be quite difficult, like for the
Mm-hmm.
average person. Like, how do you even get into
Sure.
theater? But I didn't, and I just really persevered. I just didn't allow anybody to let me think that there was one conventional way to do it. Like, oh, you have to have theater training to get into theater.
Yeah, and I
And
would say
so,
that as as a witness, being your spouse and everything, I do. I mean, you have a body of work as an artist. You've done a lot. And what I have seen, and I rarely experience this with other artists, is the acumen to be able to figure stuff out, to solve problems, everyday problems. You have great financial literacy, all of these things that are needed to be I think, a good engineer. And I believe your education was the catalyst to um, you know, kind of opening the door for yourself in a way that was very unconventional, and your guts and your courage put you in a position to continue to do interesting theater performing. You're doing industrials here. You'll do the occasional voiceovers. You're a working artist, and I think your engineering degree has only deepened yourself as an artist. I've seen it in your work. You know how to plan, you know how to produce, and those things don't typically come um, from that part of the brain that's creative. I think those skills are nurtured, and I think it was nurtured during your engineering degree. So it's been fantastic to see you evolve as an artist and as a mom and as a spouse, and I'm really excited to see you continue to build your body of work as a performer. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. But Heather, I want to thank you for kind of joining me on this and sharing with our, subscribers and listeners and those watching on YouTube about the wisdom that you've gained in your journey. Do you have any kind of final parting words for our guests and anybody who would want to get to know you better? Anything for them that you think you as an artist, given your journey, you want to share and feel like you need to make them, understand?
Well, I think it's just you can do anything. I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but you know, I faced a lot of challenges, a lot of harsh looks from my parents, and when I expressed wanting to do what I really really wanted to do. They definitely nurtured my passion for performing, but when it came to doing it as more than just a hobby, it concerned them, and sure, I think maybe my life would be different if they were a lot more like facilitating of my passions in that way. But I did it on my own, and that's the only thing you can control is yourself. I mentioned this to you, before when you first invited me, but like, because I know you're going to be interviewing a lot more people who have other credentials. They've done Hollywood films or, Broadway and stuff. And I didn't quite get to do as much, national theater as I wanted to. But I figure like if I came from the circumstances I came from and got to where I was, I would call that like a huge win. And I think, I don't know, I'm just really passionate about encouraging people that they can do anything. I have a lot of mom friends, my daughter's friends' moms who tell me like, oh gosh, I wish I could do what you do. How do you do it? And I'm like, you can do it. Like, it doesn't have to be on a big scale. Just if you're interested in pottery, take a class. You know, I didn't know the first thing about auditioning for a theater gig, and I found this workshop that the Fifth Ave was doing, and anybody could take it. And I went to this workshop, and they just explained the basics of auditioning, and I just went and did it. And so it's like there's nothing you can't do. Unless, this is like my quote that you mentioned in the beginning is there's really nothing you can't do unless you just decide not to do it. If you decide not to do something, that's pretty much the only reason why you didn't do it. But otherwise, you can do anything. You can have balance. I work during the day, my day job, but then I'm also, an artist. And sure, ever since having, my daughter, I don't have time to do 8 shows a week, that kind of theater. But I mean, in December, I was like, you know what? I've never done it, but I'm going to do a one woman show. And I just figured it out. It's just, I don't know if it was great. I
It
had a
was
good
great.
time doing it. And,
It was great.
and I wrote it, and I found a venue. I asked questions. How do you get a venue? And I just, and there were like, it was like the house was half full on the first night, pretty full on the second night. I did 2 shows, but it was just like, I just did it, and it was like life is too short, and so you can really do it if you don't don't push down, what's in your heart. So
Well,
I know a little cheesy, but
not at all. Not at all. Inspiring words to live by, and you've walked the talk. So it's been awesome to kind of hear this. I've witnessed it, but it's nice to be reminded of your talents. So Heather, thanks again. We're gonna wrap up, and tune in next week. In the next couple of weeks, actually, I'll be announcing my next guest on Facebook, on the Facebook page of this podcast. And please hit subscribe on YouTube and share with your friends. And we look forward to creating more content for you, and interviewing some very interesting performing artists with very unique perspectives. And thanks again, then, for joining us. And we'll see you next time here at Identifying as Asian While Being an Actor podcast. Thanks,
thanks for
Heather, for
having me.
joining us.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you to our guest, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Tune in to the next episode of Identifying as Asian While Being an Actor Regional Theater Edition podcast.